Hi, my name is Rob, and today I will be talking about environmental inaction or deregulation. I could also say action going in the wrong direction. I will look at a few articles that are showing that the federal government under Mark Carney is not taking the environment seriously. I made a previous video about this called Mark Carney Giving Up on Climate. I want to look at some past headlines and match the government to the headline. Canada cuts environmental spending. In the Guardian, that was hopeful. Conservatives. Environment Canada cutting 700 jobs. In the Independent, that was hopeful. Environment spending faces steep cuts in the energy mix. Carney, Canada Freshwater Agency stares down budget cuts national observer. That was Carney. Hundreds of jobs cuts loom for Environment Canada workers. That was in the Globe and Mail. And that was hopeful. And then Fed's cuts to climate research travel funds mind-boggling, May says, and that was in National Observer, and that was under Trudeau or Carney. So this gives a sense that what's happening or is proposed to happen is similar under both conservative and liberal governments in terms of environmental deregulations. And the conservative government has been known to cut environmental regulations. One of the articles that I'll look at talks about this. And I will start looking at the articles. So this is the first article that I'll look at in the National Observer. Federal Freshwater Agency stares down budget cuts. And this was September 17th, 2025. And there was text from the Environment and Climate Change Minister, Julie Dabrosin, staff that suggested that there was nowhere else to cut. And this is in regards to protecting Canada's an agency that is supposed to protect Canada's freshwater. And there was a proposal to cut 15% over 3 years. And the Canada Water Agency is less than a year into its mandate. NDP MP Alexandra Boris said that it's a really bad decision at a really bad moment. And water is split into federal and provincial responsibility based on the Canadian Constitution and the location of where the water is. Ralph Pentland, a former water director at Environment Canada, said fresh water has become a strategic priority in Canada because President Trump has directly threatened to take our water resources. And then there was a quote on Blue Sky that I highlighted from this article. Freshwater management underpins everything: health, agricultural security, and has massive political implications at a time when Canada and the US are embroiled in a trade war. Experts say an agency tasked with navigating these crises is facing cuts. And the Canada Water Agency could protect people against pandemics. A notable pandemic is the COVID-19 or other diseases. And those quotes linking climate change and fresh water, comparing a shark to climate change and the teeth to the fresh water. And then Canada does not have a national flood and drought forecasting strategy. That should change. There was legislation dealing with that, but because of the last election, it didn't go through. But it seemed to have wide levels of support, at least on the first reading. Let's see. Oh, and then the Canada Water Agency was also set up from the article to ensure First Nations under long-term boil water advisories are still at the table. So this has implications for limiting Indigenous rights. Green Party leader Elizabeth May said that this is not acceptable. We are at a crisis moment, and this is not when you cut the basis of understanding what's critical to healthy Canadian populations, or for that matter, to our economy. And Carney's focus on national security has largely resolved around ramping up military spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, but the climate crisis and the water crisis are much larger threat to our security. I will look at a different article. Yeah, so this is a different article about deliberations that were sent to a journalist. And I will talk about this in more additional detail. Let's see. So those talking about comprehensive review of government spending. Oh, the article is called Who Let In Ministerial Staff Accidentally Text Deliberations About 15% Spending Cut to Reportal in the National Post. So we know a lot about what might happen in the upcoming federal budget because of this leak. And we know that Canada Water Agency is on the chopping block. And that one of the staff said, yes, this cut could lead to less algae bloom restoration work across the country. And then those are brackets, not, and the Great Lakes would not be impacted. Or the Great Lakes would be retained. And that no other departments do this kind of work, others only do science and modeling. And there's another quote, the annual budget is so small you can't escape political consequences with a 15% cut. Let's see. And then the Green Budget Coalition said Environment Canada is one of the smallest, least funded departments. And there was another quote from the a coalition in Lake Simcoe from Jonathan Scott. With climate change, algae blooms will only get worse with warmer weather and phosphorus pollution. We've seen beach closures in recent years, and the situation cannot afford funding cutbacks. And I have an additional, I have information about algae blooms. I'll show the screen. This is from the National Institute of Environmental Health and Science, and this is from the U.S. The impact, and it says impacts of harmful algae blooms are depleting oxygen in water, which can kill fish and other living creatures, block sunlight from reaching organisms deeper in the water. And then there's like health implications if you're eating contaminated food. So we do need to take this seriously. And let's see. There was an article in the Pointer called Cuts Would Directly Impact Freshwater Restoration. Leaked text hints that Carney's cuts will target Water Protection Agency. And this is more detailed article. This says there's a graph that says 20% of the world's freshwater. Canada holds immense responsibility for safeguarding its lakes, rivers, and streams and wetlands, but the country's water systems are in crisis. All 167 Canadian subwatersheds are under threat. The 2017 report, WWF Canada found that all but 41 subwatersheds out of 167 have seen moderate or high impacts from climate change. And Ontario Tech University's Professor of Biological Science, Andrea Cookwood, emphasized the importance of the Canadian Water Agency role. Not just as a researcher who receives grant funding from the agency, but as a Canadian who cares deeply about the health of freshwater ecosystems across Canada. And said that there would be ripple effects on water bodies like Lake Winnipeg, where algae bloom research and restoration efforts could be scaled back. And Lake Winnipeg is the subject of legal action, which I covered in a separate YouTube video. The video is Rights for Lake Winnipeg. Let's see where I was. Oh yeah, there would be serious ripple effects, particularly. Oh yeah, that's what on Lake Winnipeg, where algae bloom research and restoration efforts could be scaled back. And then the funding, Jonathan Scott, the executive director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, said the funding wasn't negotiable. It was already less than what we were hoping for based on Liberal Party's promises in the election. We can't take away funding that already feels insignificant and expect lake health to improve. The reality is we need more support, not less. And then those threats from phosphorus pollution, eutrophication, and other conditions. Those are the main conditions that trigger toxic algae blooms, which increase beach closures, and they are intensified by climate change. And then those hot water increases phosphorus pollution, over fertilizing, less oxygen. And there's examples of cuts from the conservative government in the 2010s that there hasn't been recovery from. And so there's going to be even further cuts. Some organizations haven't even been restarted, such as the National Roundtable on Environment and the Economy. Cookwood said that they never fully recovered. And I'm just going to see how much time I have left. So I have about 10 minutes. Right. There's concern about spending cuts elsewhere. There was an article in the Hill Times called Uncertainty Over Sunsetting Programs as Environment Canada's Spending Slashed in Half by 2028. Spending Fall Budget Update. This means that I'll be brief on this. A lot of spending cuts will be because of budget ending. Funding for programs have ended, and there was no replacement for them. So I will go to the next one. There's also the World Wildlife Foundation released a report, and there was an article, the starkest picture of wildlife lost in Canada to date. New Living Planet Report Canada. That might be of interest. And then it said that more than half of 52% of species studied are decreasing in government. And governments across Canada are prioritizing rapid development while loosening regulations that protect nature and species at risk. This is in regards to Bill 5 in Ontario and Bill C5 across Canada. Speaking of which, there is 2 events happening on Sunday the 28th. There's an event called Rising All Voices, taking on Bill 5, Community Consult. And on Monday the 29th, there was Indigenous Perspectives on Bill 5, public lecture on and discussion. And if you're interested in that, there's I'll send a link in the YouTube video, which will be posted after or before my radio show. This is naturesdefen.ca/2025/03/bill-5/. So that's in Kingston, Ontario. This is protesting Ontario legislation. I thought that you might be interested in that. So in addition, it says wildlife populations declined by 62% on average since 1970s. And so there's that report, loss of natural heritage, loss of wildlife. Oh, these are the reasons why I believe that the government is not doing, not taking climate change seriously. And I have 3 minutes, about 3 minutes left. So we'll talk about the environmental registry and see what's happening there. So there is 13 items on the environmental registry that are policy, regulations, or acts. There's the provincial priority request for municipal zoning order for transit-oriented community. Provincial priority request for municipal zoning order for transit-oriented community. And I'll go through these more in depth in a separate video or on a future episode of Environmental Soup. Provincial priority request for municipal zoning order for transit-oriented community. New requirements for data centers seeking to connect to the electricity grid in Ontario. There's something about the Planning Act, proposed municipal regulations to ensure continued application of the municipal zoning order. Constance Lake First Nation community-based land use plan. And that one ends in September. Okay, so some of these end sooner than I'll post. Anyways, thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.